Welcome in, y'all. Welcome in to Court Cowboy. This is the inaugural show of Court Cowboy. We're going to cover everything A to Z in men's tennis. And we're going to cover topics that I don't think you get much coverage in the mainstream media. We'll handle some different topics that will surprise you probably week to week. But this week, I think we're going to start off with something I've thought about over a long period of time, just building the perfect tennis player, taking an attribute or a shot from maybe the best forehand, the best serve, and then what does that guy look like when we're done with him? What kind of cyborg do we turn him into? And then, so some of you might ask why the name Court Cowboy. One might ask that question, but the easy answer is that whenever I'm talking tennis, me personally, or whenever I have the chance to play tennis, which is the biggest pleasure of all, I feel like I'm riding high. I feel like a cowboy out there. It's sort of an alter ego, it's an escape. And so this is a chance to capitalize upon that mistake week to week, get a chance to talk to you guys, and hopefully get to play some tennis in between, but I'll be riding high all the time. I hate to reference Arnold Schwarzenegger. I won't reference that exact quote, but it was something he was doing all the time, and he was in heaven. So that's kind of the same thing. I'm going to be in heaven as long as I'm talking tennis and playing tennis when I get the chance, and doing it on this format. It's going to be great fun, and hope you'll be along for the ride. Just subscribe and join in, comment, please. This first topic should elicit a fair number of comments, I would imagine. And then the other reason I have to mention for the name is a bit more nuanced, but this hat right here, this is the cowboy hat, and it kind of gave me the idea, gendered the idea about a channel. But I'll give a little bit of the backstory on the hat, and whenever I make picks, I'll make picks every week, sometimes depending on the importance of the tournament, maybe a couple times during the week, or if there's a big match coming up. But I enjoy doing that, and I'll do it with the odds, so it'll be a more difficult pick, and we'll run a tabulation throughout the season as to how I'm doing. We'll have sort of the Tarzan category, the win-loss, how well have you picked winners and losers, but then we'll have the more difficult, the more nuanced category we'll keep track of is how I'm doing with the odds throughout the season. Sort of what I would call more of the Wonderlic category, which, as an aside, I've always maybe wanted to use that term in some capacity. I've always enjoyed that term. And Wonderlic, if you're not familiar with it, it's always bandied about during the pre-draft season. But when the NFL players are going to the NFL Combine and they're going through the draft process, they go through this exam, this test called the Wonderlic test. And it's a measure of intelligence, a measure of adaptability in your thinking, some other nuanced sort of ways you can use your brain while you're actively under stress. But the interesting thing is the Wonderlic ranges, I believe it's from 3 to 50 on the scale. And I think you get 3 points just basically for showing up and putting your name on the paper. But the scores range from a 4 all the way up to a perfect score of 50. And I had always thought actually that a guy named Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was a quarterback for, I think he's retired now, I think he's played for at least 10, 12 years, but was an excellent backup, and at times he would come in and carry the day when the backup, or I'm sure the starter had an injury or went down. Ryan Fitzpatrick and oftentimes would come in and have a great stretch of games, and always gave people the idea maybe this guy could be a starter in the NFL, but he never could really hold up as a starter, but he had some great stretches. I remember one with I believe it was the Dolphins just a few years ago, where Tua went down and Ryan Fitzpatrick came in for maybe 5-6 games and just lit it up. And that kept him very employable. I don't know the number of teams, I'd have to look that. He was on a lot of different teams. Bit of a journeyman, but yet at the same time, obviously a really smart guy. He scored a 48 on the Wonderlic. I always thought that was the high score. But in doing a little bit of research, I found out, no, there was a guy that did the perfect 50 on the Wonderlic. A guy named Pat McAnally was a punter. But even more fascinating to me was the next guy down, one guy scored a 49. And he was known as the ultimate combine warrior, if you remember. There are any Philadelphia Eagles fans out there. A workout warrior, drafted 7th overall by the Eagles, a guy by the name Mike Mamula. But I always thought the workout warrior was in reference to his standing broad jump, his bench press, his 40 time, all the other physical measurements. But actually the other Wonderlic was a part of that whole, I mean, he really aced that combine, but it didn't work out so much as a player. But so you'll have those guys on the upper end of the scale, and then lower end of the scale is sort of the ignominious group down there. And Vince Young was always the most famous, as far as I knew. He had scored a 6 on the Wonderlic. Now, to his credit, he did retake the Wonderlic and get it up to a 16, which surprisingly put him past a number of big names in the NFL. In fact, Dan Marino scored a 15 on the Wonderlic. So I'm not sure what we can really interpret from the Wonderlic. I don't know how transferable it is. Maybe I should do a whole show on the Wonderlic test. But the all-time, the most infamous was a guy drafted by my Dallas Cowboys, my team. I forget, he was drafted high, maybe 7th, 8th overall, cornerback out of LSU named Morris Claiborne, who scored a 4. So you can be on the Morris Claiborne end, and he did not work out well for the Cowboys. In fact, you'd have to describe him as a bust. But the Claiborne end, then you've got the McAnally, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Mamula end. So we'll see where I fit on that scale, picking against the odds week to week throughout the rest of the season. And the good thing is we'll turn over, we'll see good or bad at the end of the season. We'll get a chance to start it up again. But as anyone who's picked knows, you can get into, if you can get ahead of a trend, you can find a way to make some good picks, some good underdog picks, and pick up some good odds. But all of that said, getting back to this hat, this cowboy hat that I have had now for well over a decade. But the story is, I was actually with a girlfriend, and we had traveled from Texas. Take that back, she was actually in New York, living there at the time. I had traveled from Texas, and we were going to go to the US Open, and I packed very lightly, but I forgot to bring a baseball cap that I intended to pack. And she had a few hats there, and this was the only one that really fit. And this was something, it was a hat her dad had. Somehow she was in possession of it. So I was going to wear that today. It was going to be a sunny day. I think it was the first day of the US Open, maybe about 18 years ago. But on the way over, we were riding the subway over to Flushing Meadows, and just for fun, because she was also a big tennis person. We were just picking some matches, picking them not against the odds, just sort of against each other. And then it was remarkable how many matches that day that I had gotten correct. And then she just made the remark of, well, maybe it was the cowboy hat. And you know, when you're a bit superstitious, you'll hang on to anything. So I put a little bit of credence into this hat, and then I proceeded to wear it a number of times, and it had some good luck. It became sort of a good luck charm. And I became attached to it. I even gave it a name. This became the real McCoy, and McCoy for short. But what really happened, what got me stuck to McCoy was, on a couple of occasions, I lost track of McCoy. One time I lost McCoy. One time I was on a hike. We were high up. The wind blew the hat off. It flew off into the distance. But I could see it land. I thought I saw it land in an exact area well below where we were. And when I got down there, I searched all around. Couldn't find McCoy. But then even further down on the trail as we're walking, there's McCoy, just in the middle of the trail, looking at me as if he was waiting on me to pick him up again. So for me, that was ominous, and I attached a bit more importance to McCoy. And then there was another time when I felt someone had stolen McCoy, but the next day someone gave McCoy back to me, which I thought was sort of miraculous. There was a whole backstory with that, but it gave me a little more attachment to McCoy. And no need to call the loony bin this soon, because I'm not crazy. This is the only inanimate object that I've named that I actually formed a relationship with, but somehow McCoy has stuck with me. And I've been traveling for the last several years abroad, and I've had to go to some lengths to keep McCoy in good shape. I always carry him outside the luggage, so he's never misshaped. He's well taken care of. But whenever I make the picks, McCoy will be on, and we will see if McCoy continues his good luck throughout the rest of this season. If there is a method to the madness with McCoy, if there's some real extrasensory perception that he's passing on, because I think there is. We'll see. All that said, that's kind of the reasoning for the channel. That's what we're going to be doing this year. But I thought I'd kick this off with kind of a fun topic, something I like to think about. I've talked about with a couple of friends. And it's building the perfect tennis player. Who's the ultimate player, taking an attribute, a stroke from what we might feel is the best serve, the best forehand, put it on this guy, and what kind of cyborg do we build? So I'm going to get right into this because I looked a bit into this, and it's a bit surprising when you have an idea just based on the eye test of how I think that guy, let's take the serve. This guy's got the best serve ever. But when you dig deeper into the numbers and some of the advanced metrics, which I'm kind of a fan of, I've given a lot of credence to those metrics, even in the NBA. I know they were frowned upon when they first sort of broke onto the scene with guys like Daryl Morey, the GM of the 76ers, sort of rebuilding the 76ers with the process in using advanced metrics such as box plus minus, value over replacement, PER, player efficiency rating, a whole host of metrics. But they've gained a lot more acceptance these days in the NBA. I feel like it's not bandied about much in the tennis world, but I think they can gain acceptance over time. And so I give a lot of credence to it. I actually know a guy named Craig O'Shaughnessy. He was a college roommate, but I know he sort of made a living out of crunching the numbers, looking at different patterns. And so I think I'm on the same page with Craig. But when I look at these numbers, one quick aside I just wanted to share, and this could be completely irrelevant. This is not tennis, but just related to this topic. But when I was looking up some of the advanced metrics, and then I ran across some NBA metrics that were really shocking to me. When you look back, the number one season PER, player efficiency rating for an NBA player, and you do see some difference in a few of the rankings, but last ranking I looked at is Nikola Jokic with number 1, 2, and 4 all-time seasons in terms of player efficiency rating. And number 3 was the 61-62 season from Will Chamberlain, where he averaged 50 points, 23 rebounds. Interestingly enough, and he was not even the MVP that year. MVP was actually Bill Russell, who averaged about 18 points, I think about 24 rebounds. And then also Oscar Robertson that year averaged the first triple-double in history. But yet Bill Russell was the MVP. And that's just been interesting. I guess you had to be in that time to kind of, maybe they didn't place the value on the numbers, maybe even we do now, but interesting to see. And then he had a couple of other MVPs, Bill Russell, where he was averaging 16 points in that range. One year, Elgin Baylor, I believe, averaged 37 points, and yet Bill Russell won the MVP. And that's actually another show I'm going to do upcoming. I've thought about is make NBA to ATP tennis player comps. Who is Roger Federer? Who's his comp in the NBA? Who's Djokovic's comp? And I'm going to do that in an upcoming show, and I think it'll be fun. But today, to get to this, as I was saying, the numbers, we'll start with the serve. And the serve, you think about, I think about 5 or 6 guys that would really leap to the top of your mind. Some honorable mentions, really, but Nick Kyrgios, obviously, great serve, huge second serve, broke down a little bit at times. Of course, I remember the match with Federer in Miami, the 3 tiebreakers, but serve just dominant. And Pete Sampras, of course. And if I could cut this up into first serve and second serve, you probably have to put Sampras as the best second serve of all time. But I think overall, serve-wise, he's in the conversation. And Ivo Karlovic, of course, Big Ivo, played a long time. His numbers are right up there. But I think when you break it down, and you look at another couple of guys, Sinner's obviously the best serve right now in the game. Certainly see Ben Shelton growing into that serve even more and more. That could be one of the best, especially as a lefty, to deal with, and he could really crank it. And get other big servers have been around, Milos Raonic. But when I think about it, it really comes down to Federer, of course. I have to mention him as well. Federer, obviously, over 11,000 aces in his career. Sort of a bit underrated on the serve, I feel like. But those who obviously know tennis always held his serve in high regard, but maybe not as the best, but a great spot server, great clutch server, right up there. And won, I believe, 89% of his serve games, which is an impressive, amazing score, amazing statistic. But I think it boils down to the 2 guys that I thought of, and the guy I thought immediately of as having the best serve always in my mind, before I really broke into the numbers, was Ivan Isavic, because really what he accomplished with that serve, and obviously being lefty, but his run at Wimbledon, I believe it was 2001, winning Wimbledon, 3 other finals at Wimbledon, at a time when obviously the serve was at a greater premium on the grass. But he's right there. But I think you have to look at the fact, one detraction I think is his first serve percentage was 55%. And then I look at the other guy, and I think you gotta know what I'm talking about, is John Isner. His first serve percentage, lifetime, I believe, 66, 67%. Great kick serve, great first serve, second serve. Obviously, crank it. I believe he has I always thought Sam Groth had the highest rated or highest clocked serve in terms of all time. But when I looked up, it's Isner at 157 miles per hour. But I thought Groth had broken into the 160s. But it didn't seem to have that information on Groth. But yeah, it's hard to argue with. He won 92% of his serve games. Really, that's the best ever. I think even Ivanisevic was not quite there, and Karlovic I think was about 90, 91. So close. But when you take all the numbers and the totality, and you've got a 6'11" guy, this imposing presence, and it's just hard to imagine more, even a complete serve that he had with that kick serve. So I got to go John Isner, first serve, second serve total in totality. Now moving on to forehand. This is probably the toughest one, I think, for me, exactly, because you have a lot of guys that pop in. There are a number of guys even today that have really excellent forehands. Think of Fonseca. He's got maybe not as adaptable with that forehand. I might not know what I'm talking about in terms of that, but his grip looks a little extreme. I don't know if he can adapt as well as, say, Federer does or has. And of course, Rublev, excellent forehand. Sinner, maybe has the best forehand right now. Alcaraz, obviously, great forehand. But then you look back at the great Fernando Gonzalez with the missile, the absolute missile, flat missile he could launch. Just a devastating weapon. But I think it does come down. And then Del Potro, when you look at some of the ratings, Del Potro oftentimes is rated with the second best forehand. The second most devastating forehand, winners to errors. Although I'm not sure about that when I say that. Because winners to errors was actually excellent for both Federer and Nadal. I think it comes down to those two guys. And going into it, I always thought it's Nadal's forehand. I mean, we saw the way it could, obviously, especially on clay, could dismantle opponents, especially against Roger Federer on the backhand wing. And the way he can run around that forehand and hit more forehands. I think he finished forehand to backhand 55% to about 45%. Forehand to backhand finishing points. And for Djokovic, Federer, say it's around 50-50. So that's the fact that he can run around and get to that forehand, the way he can go inside in, inside out with that forehand was unparalleled. And just the spin rate he could accomplish was obviously unparalleled, pushing 5,000, above 5,000 RPMs at times. But when you do break it out and you look at a few of the advanced metrics, especially one called, I believe, efficiency rating, looking at errors to finishing with the forehand, and then, which surprised me because I'd always thought that I tend to see Federer shank quite a few forehands in my estimation, especially against Nadal. But of course, later in his career with the new racket, it did seem to clean up quite a bit. But when you look at all the different metrics, you look at the plow through, you could make the case that Federer is the best forehand ever on hard court grass, and you got to give it to Nadal on clay. But just making the total evaluation, I think I got to go with Roger Federer. And then you look at the later in their career, obviously when Nadal and Federer were playing, Federer with the new racket, look at those few of those final matchups, Indian Wells, Miami. Federer's forehand, and that was a hard court, of course, on both occasions, but it had more plow through. I mean, he's obviously got he's very adaptable in everything he does, but flatten it out. He could get his RPMs up to 4,500 on occasion, if need be. But when you look at it in its totality, to my surprise, I've got to go Roger Federer on the forehand. And I almost hate to do it because a lot of these different categories, he's going to be the number one guy when we break into it a little bit deeper. So forehand, I'm going Federer. Nadal, kind of a 1B. To my surprise, it switched around. Now we go backhand. Backhand, I'm going to have to because I have great affinity for the one-hander. I play a one-hander. I always enjoy watching the one-handers more so. I have kind of a always pull for the one-handers. I want to see the one-handers win, do well. I want more one-handers to come back. I'm not going to call the two-hander an abomination, but it's it's just obviously not quite as elegant as the one-hander, or regal as the one-hander, I would say. And the one-hander is an endangered species. I think we have 6 guys in the top 100 now that stands out of the top 100. I think we have 6 guys with a one-hander. I think you have Pesci Pericard, Kovacevic, Shapovalov, Altmaier, Tsitsipas, and Musetti. I think that's it. But among those guys, yeah, I'll get to this in a minute, but I'll go first with the one-hander category since I'm talking about it. But obviously, I think you got to go, and I'm going to break this down, and this is my list, so I can do it. Don't put a gun to my head and make me do the entire backhand. But for the backhand, I'm going to go topspin backhand because I got to go to stand for the topspin backhand. Just for the RPMs, for the speed, for how reproducible that stroke is. And that's one thing I say in relation to today's guys with one-handers. I'm surprised. I don't really see anyone sort of emulating Stan's stroke. The open stance with the everted foot, the big shoulder turn. And of course, Stan had an incredible core. The core was a big part of turning those shoulders. A bit more of a shoulder-based stroke rather than the other backhand, say a Federer, a Dimitrov, a Gasquet, that's more of a pinching the scapulas together, sort of a chicken wing, large, not the stand. He also uses that offhand to gain a lot of leverage, but I don't see anyone really emulating that stroke with a lot of, I'm surprised I don't, because it's been so successful, but you could probably dig deeper as to why that is, but very reproducible because it's more big muscles, it's more shoulder turn, shoulder through, it's more driving from the ground. Not that all the other backhands don't gain the power straight from the ground, but he's more attached to the ground. He's more grounded. I look at a guy like Shapovalov, and he's a bit, to me, him and Dimitrov, such great athleticism, but a bit bouncy out there. Shapovalov, I think he would benefit from being a bit grounded. Even Dimitrov too, I always thought he's bouncy out there. The athleticism, it's like it can't be contained. They both got hops, I'm sure. They can both get up. But I think, yeah, this is just me from 1,000-foot view with no coaching experience whatsoever, and just and no high-level competitive experience whatsoever. This is just me from the sidelines, but it just seems as if those guys in particular, they could be more grounded in the backhand. They could use more of the ground in making the stroke. But that's just an aside. But Stan's, as we know, was incredible, was so unique, still unique in my opinion, my estimation. And I'm ready to see another guy get out there and sort of hit it the way he does. I mean, I like Kovacevic's backhand. I like the way he's a bit more grounded, but it's not quite the same. He's not sort of rotating everything through and around the hips. So I'm ready for someone to take that approach. I think he can be successful. Obviously, Stan, you got to mix it in, because I thought Stan's, at the same token, that his slice was a bit pedestrian, and he would have to stand way back to return the serve, of course, and he was great on clay. He's got time to wind up, like a lot of guys, like Guga had time to wind up. But yeah, I think it can be successful, maybe modified a bit, make it a little bit new gen, but mix in being more grounded, being more new gen. Okay, and then that takes us, I've got to cut it into the slice, because I have to put the Federer slice at the top. We all know that. I think it's, what's the recorded 5,300 on the RPMs from the Federer slice. And he was so varied, so adept with it, so well disguised as to whether he was going to chip short, he could get a drop shot from it, he could drive through. I remember that sort of running looping drop shot against Burdich that he hit that you always see on the highlight reels, where he just floats the ball up in the air, and Burdich is just absolutely still. He's absolutely, he has no words and no movement for that shot. I don't think anyone did at the time. I've never seen anything like it since. But just obviously the creativity, yeah, he's a maestro out there. So that slice is always going to be number one. Okay, so let's get on to the two-handed backhand, which you have to, in reality, I know you talk to any coaches out there that are coaching at a high level, they would say if you're going to bring someone up in the game, yeah, I would teach them the two-handed backhand. And it makes sense. The other hand on the racket, return to serve, whatever, even though Roger had a great return to serve with the one-hander. But I understand that two-hander is the more complete, the more reproducible, the shot that won't break down as much. So I think this is the best backhand in terms of what you have to look at. And here immediately you got to think, I'm thinking of three guys really on this backhand. Obviously it's not going to be hard to think about who that might be, but the first guy I do think about is David Nalbandian, because it was such a monster of a backhand. I think he caught speeds up to 110 on that backhand. Maybe the best player right there with obviously Rios to not win a major, but now that Zverev won his major. But I know Nalbandian did a lot of damage with that two-handed backhand. I remember he had a stretch there, and he was always a very tough matchup for Federer. I think he beat Federer 8 times versus 11 losses, but every time was a battle. And I remember that, I think it was 2005, I think it was, when he won the Masters, ATP Masters at the end of the year, when it was 5 sets. He beat Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer in that tournament. Beat Federer in the final, I believe it was 5th set, but I think it went sort of overtime. I think he was a win by 2 in the final set. I think it was 9-7 in that final set. But Nalbandian was, he was a terror out there with that backhand. So he's definitely up there, but honorable mention, I think, because you gotta, just in terms of being defensive, being offensive, transitioning, I'm looking at center, I'm looking at Djokovic. And you gotta say Djokovic in terms of defense. Of course, the way he can use his flexibility, athleticism, and he can hit those, open stance, backhands on the run. It's hard to go in that return to serve. But center, when you look at the numbers, the spin rate's higher, he's hitting it faster. I think his average is, I'm sure on that, I think it's 70, maybe 75, 76, no, 70, maybe 73, 74 on his average backhand, whereas Djokovic, I think, is around 68. I could be wrong on those numbers. 67, 68, so as much as I'd like to go with Djokovic on that, I think you got to go with the new gen. You got to go with the guy who's got he's got more margin there with that spin rate and he can, he's got some variability with it. He's getting there where he's starting to hit a few more drop shots. I saw him hitting some drop shots on the backhand wing for the first time just at these recent tournaments on clay. So I think, as much as I hate to do it, I think that goes to center on the backhand. Okay, now next, let's say, in terms of, I'm thinking net game, should that be a separate category from volley, or is that all-encompassing? Because, I think I'll just make net game to include the volley and just presence at the net. For me, this is easy. I think it's a slam dunk again. Other guys that you think about, obviously they're a little bit old school guys when we had more serve and volley play, but of course Hedberg, Boris Becker, but Pat Rafter, Pete Sampras. But I mean, the guy is the king. I think Roger Federer. The hands, you haven't seen hands operate this way. Maybe McEnroe was close. You got to put McEnroe up there too, but great hands. But I haven't seen anyone do a couple things that Federer does when he rushes the net. Someone can hit just a rocket for a passing shot or a turn to serve. And Roger has, with unrated, I believe, athleticism, the ability to close on a ball just on the full stretch. It's like a squash shot. And then at the same time have the dexterity just to soften the hands and hit the perfect shot right over the perfect drop shot right over the net into the short area of the court there, and just impossible for the opponent to get to it. So the way he could advance on the ball and the way he always moved forward at all times, how many times you see Federer at the net, just on top of the net, maybe for a second volley. But at the same token, the guy that rarely got lobbed, his anticipation, his feel to net was, I think, unparalleled. So it's got to be Federer. I got to put him up there. Again, honorable mention to Pat Rafter, was an amazing volleyer, amazing at the net. Edberg was a little bit before my time, maybe a little bit on Becker too, but yeah, great players. Pete Sampras, of course, great at the net. But it's Roger at the net. And then to piggyback on that, another category I have to mention is the overhead. I think it's a bit maybe understated these days, because you see so many guys nowadays. Of course, guys don't come into the net as much, but you see so many guys getting lobbed. It seems to happen a lot in today's game. Maybe it's a little bit of the equipment, I don't know, but you hardly ever saw Federer get lobbed. And if someone threw a lob up on him, his overhead was absolutely definitive. It was, you weren't coming back from his overhead. It was very rare that you would lob him, you would get it over him. At the same time, as I mentioned, with a guy who's so aggressive and pressing the net, to have that ability to get back, to cover the lob, it was just incredible. I think, so the overhead to me is no question. I don't even know who I'd put. Nadal was very underrated, I believe, at the net, very underrated. In that regard too, excellent overhead. I think if we were gonna break this out a little bit further, which I think I will, we'll break it out a little bit further in terms of the backhand smash. I'm giving that to Nadal, for sure. I mean, that was an incredible shot he had. He hit the wildest angles with that backhand smash, or just put it away with a real pop, with a real pop of the wrist. So I think I'll give that to Nadal, the backhand smash. So that's net game, and let's see. Let's move on to return of serve. Now this one's going to be a bit controversial, because everyone always thinks immediately, and I do too, Djokovic. But I did look at the numbers a bit, and I did think of this guy's right there, 1A, 1B. And for return of serve, I got to go Agassi. I mean, the way his hands were incredible, especially with I remember him playing Ivan Isavic in the final, when he beat Ivan Isavic in the Wimbledon final. I mean, his ability to step into the court and take something early. Always his ability to take balls early with his hands, but the way he could do it with the serve, he could redirect on the serve, and maybe the equipment wasn't quite as advanced as it is now. But I think Agassi, that was always something that amazed me just in watching him. And then you do bear the numbers out, he's right there. I know Djokovic is regarded, and I'll probably get dinged a great deal if we do have some comments on this, that Djokovic is by far the best return. But I think most would have to agree that Agassi's right there. But if you do take the time to break it down, even look back at some of that older footage, go back and look at him against Ivan Isavic in that Wimbledon final, and many matches against Pete Sampras, he handled that serve. But I'm taking Agassi at return serve. And let's see, I think we have to look at just movement overall as another category. This one's tough. It depends on how you want to look at movement, because I'm going to have another category of just defense. Let's go defense first. Best defensive player I think I've seen is Alcaraz. I think some may argue with that, but the way this guy can cover the court and the way he can transition on you, I mean, in his hands, his dexterity from any position, the way he can hit shots on the full stretch, I think it's Alcaraz. I think I'm gonna go with Alcaraz. And again, Djokovic is right there, but I think Alcaraz takes the cake here. I think he's gonna progress that even further as he goes along his career. Hopefully he comes back even stronger here for the rest of the season. And then movement's kind of another question, because you look today, and I mean, it's hard to imagine someone being much faster than De Minaur. I mean, his speed, his movement really takes a toll on opponents. What do you got to win a point? What do you got to do to win a point against this guy? But then you look at Federer, the way he moved. I mean, he was like a ballerina out there. And as long as he played on a lot of tennis, the injuries really were minimal. He had the knee injuries, and that sort of got him in the end, I believe. But yeah, it's hard to go against Federer's movement. I remember Michael Jordan watching Federer. I was watching a broadcast, and he was watching him at the U.S. Open in person. He said that was the first thing that struck him as an athlete, just the movement, the way he's so light on his feet, and the anticipation. I think when you add all that in, I'm going Federer for movement. I got to go get that as well. And I think that might cover everything we're looking at here. I don't know if I'm missing anything. What am I missing? Oh, yeah, I think another category these days that we could put in there, I think it's relevant, is the drop shot. So forehand, backhand, drop shot. This is going to sound like a broken record, but on the backhand side, I think it's Federer all day long. The way he can not only disguise, but some of his drop shots I've never seen really replicated. I remember him hitting the drop shot as a return to serve against Nishikori, that Nishikori barely even moved. And it would hit over the net and have the side spin, just absolutely impossible. And just the way he used it, sometimes in transition, I almost wish he would have. I think he's mentioned that for a long time, he looked down his nose at the drop shot early in his career, that if he could have incorporated it earlier in his career, he maybe felt like it wasn't maybe respectful for the game. Maybe I'm interjecting a bit there. I don't know if he would go that far as to say that, but I think that's maybe what he's thinking. It wasn't the purest way to play. But once he did, I mean, what a weapon. You've got to honor every bit of the court, and he can pull it out at any time. So I got to go him. And then forehand drop shot, I got to go Alcaraz. I mean, just absolutely incredible. The disguise is incredible. Just the way he can, he's a magician with that forehand. The way he softens the hands, great hands at the net as well. He's going to be an all-time great already, but anxious to see what he does with the rest of his career. But that really broke him, I think, onto the scene. I think that was one way in which he was ending points a lot of the time. And when you have to honor the entire court with this guy who's playing in such incredible defense and such incredible forehand and athleticism, it's a recipe for the best player in the world, along with Jannik Sinner. So I think that covers all of our categories here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back. The Wimbledon draw comes out, I believe, on Friday. Today is, I think, Tuesday. In a couple of days, I'm going to come back. I'm going to make some picks. We're going to go through the draw, and I'm going to put McCoy on here. And I don't want to put him on really until he's really called upon. But McCoy, I'm going to don him for the picks, and we'll begin to keep that tabulation, and we'll see where I fall on the, as I mentioned, the Tarzan scale, the win-loss straight up, or the Wonderlic scale, to say how really well you're picking. But that's going to kick off the season. That's going to kick off the show here with Court Cowboy. Please subscribe and be able to get information, be able to get different shows and different picks every week. We're going to be very consistent with the shows, and look forward to talking to some of you maybe in the comments, or make some comments on this. If I did forget anything, please let me know. I think I covered virtually everything possible. But that's the ultimate player. And we'll see. We're kind of running a mom and pop production right now, but we'll see if we can interject some graphics so you're not looking at me the entire time while I'm talking about this. But thanks for watching if you come this far. And the next actual topic I think we might cover is going to be a bit controversial. I'll keep it. I still have to decide if it's going to be the right time, but maybe we'll get through Wimbledon and get to that. But we shall see. Look forward to a great Wimbledon. Look forward to seeing you guys hopefully in a couple of days, and we'll make picks and play it out. Thanks a lot. See you soon. Bye.